Hello everybody, Steely here, and we are back with a guide for you today on Gargoyles. Now, Gargoyles is a fantastic Slayer task that I do recommend doing when you have the option. It's great in terms of GP per hour, it's relatively AFKable, and of course gives you a chance at getting that tasty Granite Maul drop. It is given to you by several different Slayer Masters, which I have thrown on the screen now, so you can get it from a number of different Slayer Masters, and I do recommend that you take it on. In terms of requirements, you're not going to need too many different things. The first thing is you do need 75 Slayer. You're also going to need 80 plus combat, and the last thing, you're going to have completed the Priests in Peril quest. If you do not have the quest, unfortunately you won't be able to do this, as the only place that gargoyles are located is in the Mauritania Slayer Tower. A couple of additional recommendations that I do have is if you are using RuneLite, to use the RuneLite plugin NPC Aggression Timer. That's just going to make this a little bit more AFKable, and I will show you that later on in the video. The next thing I would recommend is unlocking the Gargoyle Smasher perk for 120 Slayer points. This is just going to make it so that you're able to smash the gargoyles automatically, so you don't have to click them with the rock hammer every single time. Makes it a little bit more AFKable, speeds up the process, and then of course you should have unlocked the Bigger and Badder perk because you're going to get a crack at the Marble Gargoyles, which I will show later on in the video as well. And lastly, you should have some high alch runes in your inventory while you're doing this task, as they are going to drop a number of alchable items. On the gear side of things, there isn't too much going on here to recommend. The biggest thing is going to be bringing your best crush weapon for these. Gargoyles are weak to crush, which just means that you want to have like a zombie axe, an abyssal bludgeon, ursine chainmace, something along those lines while you're doing this grind to increase the efficiency of your kills. Now, the next thing is you can either go with like a best prayer setup or a best DPS setup or a combination of the two. And there's also the Guthanz option. So I'm going to go ahead and show you all three. The first one being the budget or prayer setup here. So this gear setup is probably under 10 mil to acquire. I've got the Amulet of Glory, I've got my Slayer Helm, an Ardone Cloak, Rada's Blessing, a Zamorak book for the Crush bonus. I'm wearing Proselyte, chest and legs. I'm wearing some Prayer Boots, Explorer's Ring, Barrow's Gloves, and lastly using a Zombie Axe in my weapon slot. So this is a great budget setup. This is what I was originally using way back when I started doing gargoyles around 80-85 combat. So I would recommend using this and then bringing some prayer pots and going to town. The next option is to use a Guthanz setup, as Guthanz will heal you, so you can stay there for almost the entire duration of the task, so long as you have inventory space and prayer pots if you'd like. So this one, I just go with the Guthanz and then the highest DPS that I can possibly get. So, Berserker Ring, Primordial, Ferocious Gloves, Fire Cape, whatever your best DPS slot items are for this. And the last gear setup that I'm going to throw up here is like the high DPS, high level item setup here. This is what I typically go with now at my level. It's just my best DPS gear with my best crush weapon. So for you, it could be any variation of things. However, I find this to be more than enough to take on a significant number of gargoyles. I can usually do like 100 to 150 a trip with this gear setup here. So I think this would work just fine for you if you'd like. There are a number of other gear recommendations on the wiki. I have thrown them up on the screen, so you can use any variation of these items that you see fit. I would just recommend playing around with a few different things and figuring out what works for you. If you want to go for DPS, go for DPS. If you want to go for prayer, go for prayer. Just keep in mind that that's going to then influence the inventory items that you are going to want to take to this. But honestly, any of these items here that are listed in the wiki are going to work just fine. On the inventory side of things, I usually like to bring a spec weapon of sorts. I bring prayer pots and a couple of food. I bring a rock hammer when I'm doing normal gargoyles. You can use thrown hammers, just keep in mind that you get one per, so every time you throw a hammer, it's going to destroy it, and you're going to have to restock them. So I just recommend using the rock hammer. It's going to be more than sufficient for this. Some high elk runes, I put them in my rune pouch, a teleport to Mauritania Tower, and then lastly a teleport back to the bank, and I've got some super combat potions in here as well. So your inventory is going to be a mix of various things depending on what you're bringing. If you've got a prayer setup, you might want to opt for more prayer pots than food. If you're using Guthanz, maybe you just bring a couple of food and a couple of prayer pots, or if you're going high DPS, you might want some food and or prayer pots. So again, this is going to come down to the setup that you use. There is no right answer here. Play around with it a little bit until you get comfortable and figure out what works for you. Now, in order to get there, you have to be able to access Mauritania, as I mentioned before. The easiest way to get there is going to be with a Slayer ring. You can direct you can direct teleport straight to the tower. So that's going to be your fastest and most efficient way to get there. However, if you don't have the Slayer ring option, then your next best bet is going to be teleporting via one of 3 different locations. So the first one is Fankin's Castle. You can teleport there level 48 with the Arceus spellbook, or you can buy some tabs from the GE. CKS Fairy Ring Teleport is another great option, and the last one is going to be the Coral Teleport, which is going to land you in Canifis. So all of these are going to be fine. However, you are just going to have to run a little bit more than if you have Slayer rings, but if you don't have the crafting level to make them, then that's what you're going to have to do. Now, once you get here, gargoyles are located in one of 2 locations. So the first location that I'm going to show you is upstairs. So when you land at the Mauritania Tower, you are going to run over, if you can, use the chain shortcut. If you can't use the chain shortcut, you're going to have to run all the way around to the stairs and climb up the stairs. I'm going to use the shortcut, but just keep in mind that you're going to the 3rd floor. So whatever works for you, you're going to have to make your way up to the 3rd floor. I'm going to use the shortcut. Keep in mind, if you are opting to use the shortcut, that you need to have a nose peg or your Slayer helm on you. So if you do come in here with a Guthanz setup, make sure you've got some sort of a head protection. Otherwise, these aberrant specters are going to do significant damage to your stats, and that's going to be a problem when you get to the top. So just keep that in mind while you're here doing the run through. Once you get up to the top of the stairs, you're going to find yourself looking at the gargoyles. They are just over in the southeast corner. You'll also notice next to them there is a staircase leading up, and that is where you will find the bossing variant, which are the Grotesque Guardians. The next place that you can find the gargoyles is downstairs in the basement. Keep in mind, however, that you can only do the gargoyles in the basement when you are on Slayer task. So it's my preferred location to go to when I get the Slayer task is in the basement, because most often there aren't a ton of players in here, so you're able to get to the gargoyles a little bit easier and you don't have as many people to compete with. So if you are going to kill them in the basement, just keep in mind that you must be on a Slayer task to do so. The next thing to talk about is the NPC Aggression Timer. Now, this is a plugin that I find super useful for making this AFK. So you'll notice on my screen I have a couple of yellow lines that go around. This is the border in which the monsters will aggro you. So when you lose aggro at the end of your 10 minutes, you'll notice the timer down at the bottom of the screen. When the 10 minutes is up, that means the monsters will no longer aggro you. So if they're not aggroing you, all you have to do is run outside of the border, and that will reset the timer. So you can run outside of the border, run back, and then you will have aggro again. This is a fantastic option for making this task a little bit more AFKable on your grind, because you don't have to constantly be attacking the monsters. You can just stand there, they'll attack you. When they stop attacking you, they lose aggro. You just run outside of the border, it resets, and you're good to go. So it just makes this task a little bit easier to do, because you're able to monitor when you lose the aggro. The last thing to talk about is Marble Gargoyles. Now, I do recommend getting the bigger, badder variant. It's not super expensive in terms of Slayer points, but it gives you a crack at that Eternal Gem and the Imbued Heart, which are, worth a significant amount. The Imbued Heart more so than the Gem. If you are going to fight Marble Gargoyles, you have one of 2 options. If you're a lower level, I recommend that you pray ranged, keep your distance, because they'll only attack you with ranged, and then either use ranged or magic to kill them. If you're higher level, such as myself, I just pray melee and attack them with melee, because they don't do very much damage to me, so I'm not too concerned. The only other thing to note about these guys is that you have to dodge the marble balls. So you'll notice a red portal will spawn below them, and a giant ball will come flying at your character. If you don't move, that ball will hit you for up to 38 damage and it will freeze you in place. So it will turn your character to stone, which is bad news bears. You don't want that. So just keep in mind when they launch these balls at you, you need to move a minimum of 2 tiles away to avoid taking any damage and or freezing in place. And that's pretty much it. There's not much to these guys. They're pretty easy to kill. As you can see, this one lasts like 30 seconds. Just make sure that you're dodging those marble balls and your life is going to be just fine. And that's pretty much all there is to talk about with the exception of the Grotesque Guardians variant. However, I will not be covering that in this video. Since it's a boss fight, there's just a lot more to talk about, and I do have a separate video on Grotesque Guardians, which I will link in the description if you decide that you want to take on the boss version of Gargoyles. So I'm not going to cover that in this video. The only thing I will tell you is that you do need to get a Brittle Key to access the Grotesque Guardians. You can only obtain a Brittle Key while you're on Slayer task killing gargoyles, and they drop at a rate of about 1 in 150. So keep that in mind. You need the Brittle Key, and then you're just going to take it back up to the top floor where the other gargoyles are. You'll notice there's a staircase that goes to the roof, and there will be a gate across it. Use the Brittle Key on it, it opens the gate, it is a one-time thing, and then after that you then have access to fight the boss, and that's it. So I'm not going to talk about Grotesque Guardians in this video. If you are curious about it, scoot down below, hit the description, and you will be able to head to my other video, which goes way in depth on Grotesque Guardians and everything that you need to know. And that's it, guys. Honestly, there's not too much to know here. These are a super chill Slayer task, one of my favorites. Great for money, great for chilling, easy to do. I highly recommend that you take them on, so hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please throw me a like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see a bunch of my other Slayer guides. I got a ton on the channel already, and I will be doing some more. And if there's a particular Slayer guide that you would like to see, just remember to throw that in the comments and I will see what I can do for you. So thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and thank you again. Have yourselves a wonderful gargoyle grind. Good luck, gamers.